Everything was set to start the railway, and some ornithologists, some bird watchers, suddenly realized that this railway was going right through the middle of one of the last two breeding grounds of a bird which is almost like a national bird in Taiwan, the pheasant-tailed jacana. And they live in the wetlands, they breed in the wetlands. And so there was an enormous fuss, and ornithologists from around the world began writing letters. So Ms. Ng thought, well, oh dear, I don't want to kill off the last of these Taiwanese pheasant-tailed jacana, which is a bird about that big. So she sent her team of surveyors out again, and they surveyed again. And they came back and they said, well, the only alternative is to destroy half a mountain, and we don't think that the environmental people will like that either. So Ms. Ng thought about it, and she said, well, if we can't move the railroad, we shall have to move the breeding grounds of the birds. So she bought up areas that had once been wetland and had been drained, and of course that's going on around the world. This is why the pheasant-tailed jacana was so rare. It had been losing its breeding grounds. And they diverted the water back into those one upon a time wetlands. And within 2 or 3 years, when I visited, there were actually more pheasant-tailed jacanas breeding in the new breeding ground than there had been in the old one. And so I carry with me a feather, a tail feather, from the pheasant-tailed jacana. So I bring these to show you how these Taiwanese symbols of hope are traveling with me around the world. My third reason for hope is what I call the indomitable human spirit, the people who won't give up, the people who tackle impossible tasks, the people who overcome tremendous physical disabilities to lead lives that are inspirational to those around them. Since we're here in South Africa for this summit, I always carry with me a little piece of limestone. This comes from Robben Island Prison. This is the quarry, from the quarry where Nelson Mandela labored for 17 of his 23 years of imprisonment, and emerged with so little bitterness that he was able to lead South Africa out of the evil regime of apartheid without a bloodbath, which nobody had thought possible. A very inspirational man who's arrived here in Johannesburg today. And I also carry around a rather strange-looking object, which I don't suppose anybody would be able to guess what it is. Now, this is not from Taiwan. I wanted to give one example of some, because I carry many symbols, not all from Taiwan. But this comes from the stump of a leg blown off beneath the knee. This man lost half his leg and also his hand when he was taking landmines from Mozambique, and one blew up, and he lost half his leg and one hand. And in spite of that, he was determined not to give in. And so, in order to raise money for the victims of landmines in places where there is very little help for them and they can't afford to get false limbs, places like Cambodia and Mozambique where he made many friends, he decided he would run in marathons and raise money to help those people back in those countries. And when he's running with his artificial leg, often in great pain, he puts the end of a sock over the stump so as to prevent the leg rubbing on the flesh of his stump. And he's just, by the way, run the most difficult race, marathon race, long distance running in the world, which is 5 days across the Sahara Desert. And he crossed the finishing line. Nobody thought he would. His name is Chris Moon. And in addition, he's just climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. Well, I do have an object from Taiwan as well. And you might not probably guess what this is either. This is from a Taiwanese. I understand, sadly, he died recently, but he wasn't young. When he was a little boy of 12, he lived in one of the islands just off Taiwan, and he picked up what looked like a beautiful shining silver ball from the sea. And that was a landmine. And it blew off one of his hands, and it also blinded him. But he wouldn't give up either, and he got over to the mainland, and he teamed up with a man who plays the accordion, who's also blind, And he'd always wanted to play the guitar, and everyone said, well, bad luck, now you've only got one hand and you have no right hand, you can't possibly play the guitar. But his friends fitted him with this over his stump, and using this he's able to play the guitar. And when I was there, they had a best-selling CD. So these are the kinds of things that are so inspirational. And you all remember the terrible earthquake in Taiwan. You remember the story of two brothers who were buried for over 6 days, and how the elder brother was giving up and saying, we'll never escape. And his young brother said, no, you mustn't give up. And while they were down there buried in this tiny little space, it was the elder brother's birthday. And so the younger brother took off a gold chain that he'd worn for many years, because it was all he had to give his elder brother and to try and give him hope. And this is something else that I was given to take around the world as a symbol of we must never give up. And the most important message of Roots and Shoots, this program for youth that's now in 60 countries, is we must never give up. It's emphasizing the importance of every single individual. Every one of us makes a difference every day we live on this planet. Every one of us makes decisions that will affect the entire planet, because we all have choices. What do we buy? What do we wear? How do we get to where we're going to go? And we have these choices, and what kind of choice are we going to make? Are we going to try and make the world a better place or not? So every group of Roots and Shoots tackles 3 different kinds of projects. One is to help their own human community. One is to help the animals around them, including domestic animals, dogs and cats and pigs, as well as wildlife. And the third is to help the environment which we all share. And the kind of projects that these kids do around the world in their 60 countries, in their more than 4,000 groups, change depending on whether they're little preschoolers of 2 and 3 or whether they're in university. They change depending on whether they're in Taiwan, in Taipei, or out in the country, or are they in the inner city of New York, or are they perhaps in mainland China where we're growing very fast, or are they in Africa? The problems are different, therefore the projects that the kids do are different. And we have 15 of our Roots and Shoots groups, 15 of our Roots and Shoots kids taking part in the Children's Earth Summit here. Unfortunately, we don't have a Taiwanese child because we only put this together at the last minute. But the hope for the future does lie in the hands of our youth. The youth can do little as very young children unless we help them. But when I see the different projects that are done, and there are 340 groups in Taiwan now, 309, and it's growing very fast. And when I see the different projects that the kids do around the world, and most important, when I see how actually doing these projects, which are hands-on projects, and seeing the change that they can make, seeing how they can clean up a stream, they can clear a place of litter, there are so many things they can actually do. And their eyes start to shine, and they know that all around the world other kids like them are doing the same kind of thing, because we're linking them all in different ways. So those really are my hopes for the future. And I thought you'd like to share the fact that I have so many objects from your country that I take around the world to give people hope, to inspire people, so that each one of us can try to do our bit as we go through our daily lives to save the planet. And some people could do a lot more than others. For those of us who are wealthy, like most people here, we have this huge power for change as individuals taken collectively, because we can make ethical choices in what we buy. And if we don't buy products from companies that don't have an ethical regard for the environment or society, very soon those companies will be doing things differently. And that hits home hard to some business people I've talked to. But they all realize that it's true. And that if we want our grandchildren to inherit a world with some of the beauty that we see today, we must make changes in our lifestyles. We must all work towards a sustainable and a dignified lifestyle, which means the wealthy must want a little less, and the poor must have a little more, and we must balance our population growth around the globe. Thank you.